The scroll was still wet. Mirea's fingers trembled as she held the impossibly thin parchment, no thicker than a whisper, still damp and warm as though it had just been born. Because it had. She knew that now. She knew, and the knowing was a knife sliding between her ribs, cold and precise and absolutely terrifying. It was growing out of him, out of the prince's skin. The steam from the private baths clung to her throat, thick and suffocating, scented with juniper and something else, something ancient and organic that made her stomach turn. She had come here looking for wood polish. A simple errand. A foolish, forgettable errand in a life built entirely on being forgettable. She was the maid assigned to the forgotten places. The dusty places. The archives where no one went, where century-old maps crumbled under her careful fingers, and the only voices were the whispers of dead kings inked onto vellum. She was no one. And no one was supposed to see this. Prince Leo stood in the sunken marble bath, water lapping at his waist, his back to her. His coat, even soaked, was magnificent. Gold and russet, thick and wild, the kind of fur that caught the light and held it, that made people stop in corridors just to watch him pass. The kingdom adored him. The Golden Prince. The one with the quick smile and the sharper mind. The one who laughed too loud at banquets and charmed foreign diplomats into friendship with nothing but wit and warmth. But he was not laughing now. His hands moved with a speed that did not belong to grooming. Precise. Hypnotic. Weaving. His claws parted the wet fur at his shoulder blade, exposing the dense undercoat beneath, and Mireia watched, frozen in the shadow of the doorway, as he pulled something free. Another scroll. Tiny. Thin as a breath. He coiled it with infinite care, his lips moving silently, and then he tucked it back, deeper, threading it into the roots with a strand of his own shed guard hair. She should have run. She should have backed out of the room, quiet as a ghost, and pretended she had never seen the prince in his private ritual. She should have returned to her maps, her dust, her safe and silent irrelevance. But then she saw the others. As Leo shifted, the lamplight caught something else woven into his coat. Not just scrolls. Vials. Glass so small they looked like dewdrops, stoppered with wax, filled with liquid that shimmered in colors she had no name for. Amber. Violet. A sick, oily black. And sigils. Carved into what looked like slivers of bone or horn, no larger than her thumbnail, bound into the fur with threads so fine it was nearly invisible. His entire body was a treasury. A library. A living, breathing archive more valuable than anything rotting in the palace vaults. And she had stumbled right into the middle of it. Mireia's boot scraped stone. The sound was nothing. A whisper of leather on wet marble. But in the silence of the baths, it cracked like thunder. Prince Leo spun, water sluicing off his chest, his golden eyes locking onto her with an intensity that punched the air from her lungs. For one heartbeat, he was still the prince. Handsome. Poised. The boy she had seen from a distance at court, always surrounded by advisors, always smiling. Then his expression shattered. Not into anger. Into fear. Raw, animal, desperate fear. He did not demand to know why she was there. He did not call for guards. He simply stared at her, his chest heaving, his claws still tangled in his own fur, and she saw the truth written across his face as clearly as any scroll. He knew she had seen. And he knew what that meant. Mireia opened her mouth, though she had no idea what words could possibly fit this moment, but Leo moved first. He lunged forward, water exploding around him, and his hand shot out, not to strike, but to catch her wrist. His grip was firm, but not cruel, his claws careful against her fragile human skin. Wait. His voice was low, urgent, nothing like the bright tenor that echoed through banquet halls. Please. Wait. She could have screamed. One scream and the guards would flood the room. One scream and she would be the maid who found the prince in his bath, the foolish girl in the wrong place, and maybe she would be dismissed instead of executed. But she did not scream. Because she saw something else in his eyes now. Not just fear. Desperation. The look of a man holding a secret so heavy it had bent his spine, and now, for the first time, someone else could see the weight. I was looking for polish, she heard herself say, and the absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Polish. As if that mattered. As if anything in her small, quiet life mattered compared to what she had just witnessed. I know. Leo released her wrist, stepping back, his wet fur clinging to the hard lines of his body. I know. You work in the archives. You catalog the old maps. You've been here 3 weeks. You take your meals alone. You don't gossip. Her heart stopped. He had been watching her. The Golden Prince, beloved and busy, had taken the time to learn the habits of a nobody maid assigned to a forgotten wing of the palace. Why? Leo read the question on her face, and something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something sadder. I watch everyone, he said quietly. It is what I do. He turned, giving her his back again, and she saw the full truth of it. The coat she had admired from a distance was not beautiful. It was a burden. Every inch of him, from shoulder to hip, was woven with secrets. Tiny scrolls tucked into the fur at his spine. Vials clustered near his ribs. Sigils dotting the dense fur at the base of his tail. He was not a prince. He was a monument to everything his father's court wanted to keep hidden. You are wondering if I will have you killed, Leo said, his voice steady now, almost conversational. He began to groom again, his fingers moving through the fur at his shoulder, checking, cataloging. You are wondering if the moment you leave this room, guards will find you in a corridor with your throat cut. An accident. A tragedy. The new maid, so clumsy. Mirea's throat closed. I will not, he continued, and now he did glance back at her, his golden eyes softer. But others would. If they knew you had seen. If they even suspected. What are you? The words slipped out, barely a whisper. Leo's smile was bitter. I am a chronicler. The last of a bloodline everyone thought was myth. My body does not just grow fur, Mireia. It grows memory. History. Truth. Every conversation I hear, every lie I witness, every secret whispered in the dark, it becomes part of me. Encoded. Woven into my coat. And I have been listening for a very long time. He pulled something from the fur at his collarbone. Another scroll, this one still damp, the ink barely dry. He held it out to her, and she took it with numb fingers. The writing was so small she had to squint to read it. But when she did, the world tilted. The king to Commander Valen, 3rd Bell, West Tower. The boy is a liability. His gifts make him dangerous. The chronicler line died for a reason. If he will not submit to binding, he must be removed. Quietly. Make it look natural. Mireia looked up, her hands shaking so badly the scroll nearly fell. Your father wants you dead. Yes. Leo's voice did not waver. And that scroll grew from my skin 2 hours ago. Fresh evidence of fresh betrayal. I have dozens more like it. Woven into my body. Proof of every plot, every alliance, every poisoned word spoken in this palace. My uncle's plan to take the throne. The foreign ambassadors schemed to crush us from within. My father's fear of what I am. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. The loneliness. He was not suffering in silence. He was drowning in noise, every secret a weight added to his skin, and no one knew. No one saw. Until now. Why are you telling me this? Mireia whispered. Leo's smile was small, sad, and unbearably human. Because you're an archivist. You understand what it means to preserve the truth. And because I am running out of time. Outside, thunder growled low and threatening. The storm that had been building all evening finally broke, rain lashing against the high windows, and Mireia felt the world narrow to this room, this moment, this impossible choice. She held the evidence of regicide in her hands. The proof that could shatter a kingdom. And the prince who had grown it from his own body was asking her to help him decide what to do with it. If you have ever held a secret so sharp it cut you just to carry it, You already know the weight settling onto Mirea's shoulders. And if you want to know what she does next, what choice she makes when the truth is literally written in a prince's flesh, then you need to stay with this story. Because what happens next will change everything. Leo moved before Mireia could process what was happening. One moment she stood frozen in the doorway, the damning scroll trembling in her hands, her mind still trying to reconcile the Golden Prince with the living archive before her. The next, he was out of the bath, water streaming down his body, a robe thrown carelessly over his shoulders as he crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He did not touch her again, but he closed the door behind her with a quiet, final click that made her pulse spike. They were sealed in together now. No witnesses. No escape. "You are afraid of me," Leo said, and it was not a question. He tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling golden eyes that seemed to see straight through skin and bone to the terror coiling in her gut. "You are afraid of what I am. What I can do. You are wondering if I have been cataloging your secrets too." Mirea's mouth was too dry to answer. She could only stare at him, at the way water still dripped from his fur, at the small glass vial visible just above his collarbone, filled with something dark and viscous that caught the lamplight like old blood. Leo's expression softened, and he took a deliberate step back, giving her space. "I have not," he said quietly. "Recorded you, I mean. You have no secrets worth preserving. No offense intended." The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like a strange, twisted relief. She was nobody. Beneath notice. Too small to matter in the great and terrible game he was playing. Except he had noticed her. He knew her routines. Where she ate. That she did not gossip. Then why tell me? Mireia forced the words past the tightness in her throat. Why not just let me leave? Pretend I saw nothing. Leo laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just exhaustion. He moved to a low bench against the wall and sat, his shoulders bowing under a weight she could not see but suddenly understood with perfect clarity. Every secret he carried was not just information. It was a living thing, woven into his body, pulling at his skin, a constant reminder of every betrayal, every lie, every poisoned word spoken in the shadows of his father's court. "Because you cannot pretend," he said, looking down at his hands. His claws were longer than a normal shifter's, she noticed. Sharper. Designed for the delicate work of weaving truth into flesh. "You are an archivist, Mireia. You have spent 3 weeks in the old royal records, cataloging maps that have not been touched in a century. You do not skim. You do not dismiss. You read every faded notation, every marginal note, as though it matters. Because to you, it does." He lifted his gaze to hers, and she saw something raw and desperate there. "You treat information as sacred. You understand that history is not just words on a page. It is proof. It is memory. It is the only thing standing between truth and the lies powerful people tell to stay powerful." Mirea's heart hammered against her ribs. He was right. She had always been that way, even as a child. Obsessive about details. Unable to let an inconsistency pass without investigating. It had made her strange. Difficult. The kind of person others avoided at gatherings because she asked too many questions and remembered every answer. It was why she had ended up in the archives. The forgotten place for a forgettable girl. Except Leo had seen her. Really seen her. And chosen to trust her with this. "You said you are running out of time," Mireia whispered. "What did you mean?" Leo's jaw tightened. He reached up, fingers finding a spot just below his ribs, and carefully parted the fur there. She caught a glimpse of another vial, this one filled with liquid the color of rust. Of old iron. Of blood left too long in the open air. "My father is not a patient man," Leo said, his voice low and controlled. "He fears what he does not understand, and he has never understood me. When I was a child, I thought my gift was a blessing. I thought I could help him. Be his perfect advisor, his living record keeper. I wove histories for him. Documented treaties. Preserved the words of dying elders." He paused, and Mireia saw the muscle in his jaw jump. Then I wove something he did not want preserved. A conversation between him and my uncle. A plan to annex the border territories by manufacturing a conflict, blaming innocents, using their deaths as justification for war. I was 12. I showed him the scroll, so proud of my accuracy. I thought he would be impressed. Leo's smile was a broken thing. He was terrified. He realized that I was not a tool. I was a threat. Because I do not choose what gets recorded, Mireia. My body does it automatically. Every significant truth that passes through my awareness, every emotion strong enough to leave a mark, it encodes itself. I am a witness that cannot be silenced or bribed or convinced to forget. He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. The lonely, terrible truth. So he has been trying to control me ever since. Keeping me close. Surrounding me with people who report my movements. And now he has decided that control is not enough. The scroll you hold is not the first time he has discussed my removal. But it is the most direct. The most urgent. He is afraid I will reveal him. Expose the rod in his court. And he is right to be afraid. Mireia looked down at the scroll in her hands. Such a small thing. Barely larger than her thumb. But the words written there could topple a king. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I do not know." The admission seemed to cost him. Leo stood, pacing to the window where rain lashed the glass in sheets, turning the world beyond into a blur of shadows. I have been weaving evidence for years. Every plot. Every betrayal. I have documented my uncle's conspiracy, the foreign ambassador's plans to infiltrate our defenses, the commander's secret meetings with enemy scouts. I carry an entire web of treason on my body. He turned back to her, and the lamplight caught the vials and scrolls woven into his coat, making him look like some ancient, sacred text given flesh and breath. But evidence means nothing if no one reads it. And the moment I reveal what I am, the moment I expose these secrets, I become expendable. My father will have me killed to silence me. My uncle will have me killed to protect himself. The court will turn on me because I know too much about all of them. Then why keep doing it? The question burst out of Mireia before she could stop it. Why keep weaving if you know it will destroy you? Leo looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft, painfully sincere. Because someone has to remember. Someone has to bear witness. If I do not, if I let these truths die unrecorded, then every victim of my father's ambition, every innocent caught in my uncle's schemes, every life crushed under the weight of court politics, they all disappear. As though they never mattered. As though their suffering was acceptable because it was convenient. He crossed back to her, and this time when he looked at her, she did not see a prince. She saw a man carrying a burden that would have broken anyone else years ago. A man who had chosen to turn his own body into a battleground for truth, knowing it would cost him everything. I cannot let that happen, Leo said. Even if it kills me. The rain pounded against the windows, and Mireia felt something shift inside her. A recognition. She knew what it was to be invisible. To be the person no one looked at twice. But she also knew what it meant to believe that details mattered. That truth mattered. That someone had to care about the small, forgotten things because if no one did, they would be lost forever. She had spent 3 weeks treating century-old maps like sacred texts because she believed that. Because she understood that history was not just the grand battles and the famous kings. It was also the careful notations of a long-dead cartographer, the faded marks showing where a village used to stand, the evidence of lives lived and lost. Leo was doing the same thing. Except his archive was alive, growing, and in terrible danger. You need help, Mireia said, and her voice was steadier than she expected. You need someone who knows how to preserve fragile documents, how to organize evidence, how to present it so it cannot be dismissed or destroyed. Leo stared at her. You are offering to help me? I am an archivist, Mireia said, echoing his own words back to him. This is what I do. For a moment, Leo did not move. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but something close. Something that looked like relief mixed with disbelief, as though he had been alone for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside him. "You understand what you are risking," he said carefully. "If anyone discovers you are helping me, you will be killed." Quietly. Efficiently. "My father is very good at making problems disappear." "I understand. You could walk away right now. Forget what you saw. Go back to your maps." "I could," Mireia agreed. "But I will not." Leo's breath left him in a rush, and for just a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked. She saw the exhaustion beneath. The fear. The desperate, aching loneliness of a man who had been fighting alone for so long he had almost forgotten he was allowed to ask for help. "Why?" he asked, and the question was barely a whisper. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Mireia looked down at the scroll in her hands. At the proof of a king's betrayal, so small and fragile and absolutely damning. "Because someone has to bear witness," she said quietly. "And I think you have been doing it alone long enough." The silence that followed was different from the fear-soaked quiet that had filled the room before. This was the silence of a choice made. A line crossed. Two people who had been strangers binding themselves together with shared purpose and dangerous knowledge. Leo closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been steel. "Then we need to work quickly," he said. "Because the commander will move against me soon. And when he does, we need to be ready to show the kingdom exactly what kind of monsters wear crowns." Mireia had not always been invisible. Once, a lifetime ago, she had been seen. Too much. Too clearly. And it had nearly destroyed her. She sat in Leo's private study now, 3 floors above the baths, surrounded by books and maps and the kind of organized chaos that spoke to a brilliant mind constantly in motion. He had brought her here after their conversation in the baths, trusting her with yet another secret, the location of his true sanctuary, the one place in the palace where he could think without being observed. Or so he believed. Mireia knew better than most that nowhere was truly safe. That being seen, really seen, was the most dangerous thing that could happen to a person. Leo was across the room, carefully transcribing something from memory onto parchment, his fingers moving with the same hypnotic precision she had witnessed in the baths. He had changed into dry clothes, but she could still see the slight bulge of the vials and scrolls woven into the fur beneath his shirt. A living archive, hiding in plain sight. She understood hiding better than he knew. "You are quiet," Leo said without looking up. "You are thinking about something that frightens you." Mireia's head snapped up. "How?" Your breathing changed. Shallower. Faster. Now he did glance at her, one eyebrow raised. "I pay attention to details, remember? It is what I am." She should have been unnerved by his observation. Instead, she found herself almost smiling. Details. Yes. She understood that too. "I was thinking about why I ended up in the archives," she admitted. "You said I had no secrets worth preserving. But that is not entirely true." Leo set down his pen, giving her his full attention. He did not press. Did not demand. Just waited, patient as stone, as though he had all the time in the world to hear her story. It made her want to tell it. "I had a gift once," Mireia said slowly, the words feeling strange on her tongue. She had not spoken about this in years. Had trained herself not to think about it. "Not like yours. Nothing so powerful or important. But in my village, in the small pack I was born into, it was enough to make me different." She looked down at her hands, at the ink stains on her fingers from weeks of cataloging ancient maps. "I could sense lies." Leo went very still. "Not read minds," Mireia clarified quickly. "Nothing so clean or useful. I just knew when someone was not telling the truth. I felt it. Like a dissonance in the air, a wrong note in a song. It made my skin prickle, made my stomach turn. And I could not ignore it." She remembered being 6 years old, in the pack meeting hall, listening to the Alpha speak about the winter stores. Listening to him promise that there was enough food, that no one would go hungry, that they just needed to ration carefully. And feeling that familiar crawling sensation on her skin, the wrongness of it. She had stood up, in front of everyone, and said, "That is not true." The silence that had followed still haunted her dreams. At first, they thought it was charming, Mireia continued, her voice distant. A child's strange intuition. But as I got older, as I could not stop myself from pointing out every inconsistency, every half-truth, every careful omission, it became less charming. She had been 12 when the Alpha's son tried to blame a younger boy for stealing from the communal stores. Had been 12 when she stood in front of the gathered pack and said, clearly and calmly, "He is lying. He took the food himself." She had been right. The evidence proved it. But being right had not saved her. "The pack turned on me," Mireia said quietly. "Not violently. Nothing so dramatic. But they stopped trusting me. Stopped including me. Every gathering became a test of whether I would expose someone's comfortable fiction. Every conversation was strained because they knew I could feel the lies beneath their polite words." Leo's expression had gone soft with understanding. With recognition. "They made you the problem," he said, instead of addressing the truths you revealed. Yes. The word was almost a sigh. My own mother asked me to stop. Begged me to just let things be. To ignore what I felt. She said I was tearing the pack apart, making people uncomfortable, causing problems where there did not need to be any. But Mireia had not been able to stop. It was not a gift she could turn off. Every lie scraped against her senses like claws on slate, impossible to ignore, and she had learned that staying silent while feeling that wrongness was worse than speaking and facing the consequences. So she had kept speaking. And the pack had kept pulling away. "They exiled you," Leo said, and it was not a question. Not officially. That would have required admitting there was a problem. Instead, they just made it clear I was not welcome. My mother found me a position here, at the palace, far away from the pack territories. A quiet job in the archives where I would not have to interact with many people. Where my gift would be useless. Mireia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Except it is not useless here. It is torture. Do you know how many lies exist in a royal palace, Leo? How many half-truths and careful omissions and political necessities? I feel them constantly. Every servant who swears they cleaned a room they barely touched. Every courtier who claims loyalty while plotting advancement. Every guard who reports all quiet when they fell asleep at their post. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the study. I have spent 3 weeks in the archives because old maps do not lie. Faded ink and careful notations are honest in a way people never are. The dead cartographers who made those maps were trying to record truth. They had no reason to deceive. So I can touch those documents without feeling sick. I can work without that constant crawling sensation on my skin. She looked up at Leo and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite name. Understanding, yes. But something else too. Something that looked almost like wonder. Until tonight, Mireia continued. Until I walked into that bath and saw you weaving truth into your own body. Until I watched you pull evidence from your skin with your own hands. Do you understand what that means to me? Her voice cracked, and she did not try to hide it. You are the first person I have ever met who does not want to hide from truth. Who does not see it as an inconvenience or a weapon or something to be managed. You are literally growing it from your own flesh, preserving it, protecting it, even though it is destroying you. Leo stood slowly, crossing to where she sat. He knelt in front of her chair, bringing himself to eye level, and when he spoke his voice was gentle. You feel it, do not you? When people lie to me. It was not a question. But Mireia nodded anyway. Yes. All the time. The courtiers who praise you while planning to undermine your father. The servants who swear loyalty while reporting to your uncle. The foreign ambassador who speaks of peace while arranging sabotage. She met his eyes. But not you. You do not lie. Ever. Even when it would be easier. Even when the truth costs you. I have been near you 3 times before tonight, passing in corridors, seeing you at a distance in the Great Hall, and every time, the silence was deafening. Leo's eyes widened slightly. Silence. Everyone else's noise, Mireia explained. Constant, grating noise. Little lies layered over big ones, half-truths wrapped in pleasantries, the endless discordance of people saying one thing and meaning another. But you're quiet. Clear. Like looking at a still pool of water instead of a churning river. She laughed shakily. I thought I was imagining it. Projecting. Wanting so badly to meet someone genuine that I invented it. But tonight, in the baths, watching you weave truth into your own body. I understood. You cannot lie. Your gift will not allow it. Everything you experience, everything you witness, it all becomes part of the permanent record. You have to live in truth because your body is literally made of it. Leo's breath had gone shallow. You are the only person who has ever understood that, he said quietly. Everyone else sees the charm, the wit, the diplomatic skill. They think I am playing the same games they are, just better. They do not realize that I cannot play. That every word I speak is true because anything else feels like poison in my mouth. I know, Mireia whispered. I know what that feels like. To be built wrong for the world you live in. To have a gift that makes you honest when everyone else wants comfortable lies. Leo reached up and very gently, very carefully, took her hands in his. His palms were warm, his claws a delicate pressure against her skin. Your gift is not useless here, Mireia. It is exactly what I need. I have been weaving evidence for years, documenting every plot and betrayal, but I am just one person. I cannot be everywhere. Cannot hear every conversation. But if you can sense lies, if you can identify who in this court is genuine and who is performing. His grip tightened slightly. You can help me know where to look. Who to watch. You can be my compass, pointing toward the truths I have not yet found. Mireia's heart hammered in her chest. She had spent years trying to diminish herself, to hide her gift, to become so small and unremarkable that no one would notice when she flinched at their lies. She had buried herself in the archives, surrounded herself with honest documents and dead cartographers, and told herself that was enough. But it had never been enough. She had been slowly suffocating under the weight of all the lies she could feel but could not address. All the wrongness she was supposed to ignore. And now this prince, this living archive, was telling her that her gift mattered. That she mattered. That together, they could do something that neither of them could do alone. I am afraid, she admitted. I have spent so long trying not to be seen. Trying not to matter. The thought of stepping back into the light, of using my gift again, it terrifies me. Leo's smile was small and sad and achingly understanding. I know. I am terrified too. Every day. Every moment. I have been carrying these secrets alone because I was afraid that trusting anyone would get them killed. But I am running out of time, Mireia. My father is moving against me. The court is a powder keg. And I cannot defuse it by myself. He squeezed her hands gently. I do not need you to be fearless. I just need you to be willing. To stand with me long enough to make sure the truth survives, even if we do not. The rain had stopped while they talked. Through the high windows of the study, Mireia could see the clouds breaking apart, revealing slivers of starlight. The storm passing. The world continuing, indifferent to the choice being made in this quiet room. She thought about her mother, who had begged her to be smaller. About her pack, who had pushed her away for being too honest. About all the years she had spent hiding in archives, pretending her gift was a burden instead of a tool. She thought about the scroll in her pocket, still damp with Leo's essence, bearing witness to a king's betrayal. And she thought about what it would mean to stand up. To be seen. To use her gift not as a curse, but as a weapon in service of something bigger than her own safety. It still terrified her. But terror, she was learning, was not the same as wrong. I will help you, Mireia said, and her voice was steady. I will stand with you. And we will make sure the truth survives. Leo's eyes brightened with relief and gratitude and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Then we begin tonight, he said. Because the commander meets with my uncle tomorrow at dawn. And I need to know what lies they plan to tell. The Royal Archives had a basement beneath the basement. Mireia had discovered it 2 weeks into her position, while cataloging a series of water-damaged estate maps. A loose stone. A draft of air that smelled older than memory. A staircase descending into darkness, so complete it seemed to swallow the light from her lamp. She had marked its location in her meticulous notes, but had not explored further. The forgotten places were her domain, yes, but even she had limits. Some forgotten things were meant to stay that way. Until Leo needed what slept in the dark. They descended the narrow stairs together, her lamp casting wild shadows on walls that predated the current palace. The stone here was different. Older. Cut by hands that understood sacred geometry, each block fitted so precisely that not even a blade could slip between them. The air tasted of mineral cold and something else. Something that made the hair on Mireia's arms rise. Power. Old and patient and waiting. The chronicler line did not begin with my family, Leo said quietly, his voice strange in the enclosed space. We inherited it. A gift passed down from the first keepers, the ones who witnessed the founding of the kingdom and knew that memory was the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. His hand brushed the wall as they descended, and Mireia saw him shiver. I have always known there was more. That my gift was an echo of something larger. But my father forbade me from researching it. Said the old ways were dangerous. That I should be grateful for what I had and stop asking questions. But you did not stop, Mireia said. Leo's smile was barely visible in the lamplight. I am incapable of stopping. It is not in my nature. So I researched in secret. Late at night. In restricted sections. And I found references. Fragments. Mentions of a place beneath the palace where the first chroniclers kept their most important records. Not woven into flesh, but carved into stone. Permanent. Unalterable. The foundation upon which everything else was built. The staircase ended in a corridor lined with doors. 7 of them, each carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the lamplight. Not written language, but something older. Ideograms. Concepts made visual. Truth. Memory. Witness. Sacrifice. Mireia's gift flared to life, that familiar sensitivity that usually warned her of lies. But this was different. These symbols were not speaking falsely. They were simply speaking in a language her conscious mind did not know but her body recognized. Ancient. Foundational. True in a way that made modern words feel like pale shadows. Leo moved to the central door, marked with a symbol that looked like a spiral wrapped around a flame. He pressed his palm flat against it, and Mireia watched in fascination as the fur on his hand seemed to glow faintly, responding to something in the stone. The door swung inward without a sound. The chamber beyond stole Mireia's breath. It was circular, the walls rising to a domed ceiling painted with constellations she did not recognize. But it was the floor that commanded attention. Carved into the stone in an intricate spiral pattern, starting at the outer edge and winding inward to the center, were words. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Each letter cut deep and filled with what looked like silver that had not tarnished despite what must have been centuries of neglect. The first record, Leo breathed, his voice reverent. I have been searching for this place for 3 years. Mireia knelt at the spiral's edge, holding her lamp close to read the script. It was an older dialect, the grammar archaic, but comprehensible. And what it described made her skin prickle with recognition. In the time before crowns, when the pack was all and the individual was nothing, truth died daily. Convenient lies built false peace. Comfortable omissions allowed cruelty to flourish. The strong devoured the weak, and no one bore witness because memory was negotiable and history belonged to whoever survived to tell it. Then came the first speaker, who could not lie, whose body rejected falsehood as poison, and the first listener, who heard the discord and deception, who felt wrongness like a wound. Separately, they suffered. The speaker, shunned for harsh honesty. The listener, exiled for unbearable sensitivity. But together, they became something new. The speaker would witness and record. The listener would guide and verify. 2 halves of a sacred whole. the foundation of justice, the beginning of true civilization. We name them Chronicler and Clarion, Keeper and Compass, the ones who ensure that truth survives when power would rather it die. Mireya's hands had gone numb. She read the words again, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts over the rush of blood in her ears. Chronicler and Clarion, Keeper and Compass. Leo had gone very still beside her. When she looked up at him, his expression was stunned. Awed. Afraid. Clarion, he repeated softly. The one who hears discord. Who senses lies. Who guides the chronicler toward truths not yet recorded. He looked at Mireya, and she saw her own shock reflected in his golden eyes. That is you. That is your gift. Not a curse. Not a broken piece of empathy. You're the other half of what I am. The tradition I never knew I was missing. Mireya shook her head, instinctively recoiling from the weight of what he was suggesting. No, I am just a girl who feels uncomfortable around liars. There is nothing sacred or special about. Read further, Leo interrupted, gesturing to the spiral. Please. She did not want to. Every instinct screamed at her to stand up, to walk away, to return to her safe and small existence among the maps. But her archivist's training was stronger than her fear. A primary source was a primary source, and this one demanded to be read. She followed the spiral inward, reading aloud so Leo could hear. The gifts are not accidents. They are inheritances, passed through bloodlines like eye color or feng shape. Dormant in most. Active in few. But always present, waiting for the generation that needs them most. When a chronicler awakens, a clarion will be near. The world ensures it. Because truth without guidance is chaos, and guidance without record is meaningless. They are two threads of the same weave, designed to work in tandem, to balance each other, to ensure that when the powerful threaten to drown justice in convenient lies, there will be those who resist. We have built this place, we first pairs, as a message to those who come after. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are exactly what the world needs, even if the world does not yet know it. And when the time comes to speak truth to power, when you must choose between silence and exposure, between safety and service, remember, the spiral always leads inward. The truth always leads home. And home is not a place. It is a purpose shared between two souls brave enough to bear witness together. Mireya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall, but her throat was too tight to speak. She was not broken. She was designed this way, built for a purpose so old it predated the kingdom itself. And Leo, the golden prince with secrets woven into his skin, was not just someone she had stumbled into helping. He was her complement. Her partner in the oldest, most sacred work imaginable. No pressure, then. There is more, Leo said quietly. He had moved to the center of the spiral, where the words converged into a final symbol. The same spiral-wrapped flame that had marked the door, but larger, more elaborate. And around it, a border of text so small Mireya had to squint to read it. When the chronicler's coat grows heavy with truths that could shatter kingdoms, and the clarion's gift screams with the discord of terminal corruption, the time of unweaving has come. The living archive must be read aloud. The keeper must become bare. And the compass must choose, preserve the truth in silence, or unleash it and watch the world burn clean. Know this, the unweaving is sacrifice. The chronicler who shears his own coat, who lays his evidence bare before a hostile court, will not survive the exposure. The body cannot sustain such loss. The gift will consume itself, burning through what remains in a final, desperate attempt to preserve what has been revealed. But the truth will survive. If the clarion stands witness. If the compass records what the keeper can no longer hold. The spiral continues, even when individuals fall. Mireya felt sick. It will kill you. When you reveal what you have woven. When you expose the court. The act of removing it all at once will. Yes. Leo's voice was steady. Resigned. I know. I have always known on some level. The weight I carry is not meant to be borne forever. It is meant to be released. And the release will be terminal. He looked down at the symbol beneath his feet, and Mireia saw the exhaustion in every line of his body. The quiet acceptance of someone who had made peace with his own death long ago. But you should not have to die for this, Mireia said, her voice breaking. There has to be another way. A slower revelation. Piece by piece instead of all at once. There is no time for slow. Leo lifted his gaze to hers, and she saw the truth there. The terrible, inescapable truth. My father moves against me within days. My uncle's plot reaches fruition before the next moon. The foreign ambassador's sabotage is already in motion. If I do not act soon, if I do not expose everything simultaneously, the kingdom will tear itself apart from within, and no one will understand why. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his, and she felt the faint texture of the scrolls woven beneath his skin pressing against her palms. I need you to be my clarion, he said softly. I need you to stand beside me when the time comes. To verify what I reveal. To use your gift to confirm that everything I expose is true, so they cannot dismiss it as fabrication or madness. Your testimony will be the seal of authenticity on my sacrifice. And then what? Mireia demanded, anger rising through her grief. I watch you die. I stand there while your gift consumes you. I become the sole keeper of truths too dangerous for one person to hold. No. Leo's grip tightened. Then you run. You take what I have taught you, the cataloging system I have developed, the hidden duplicates I have made of the most critical evidence, and you disappear. You become the wandering archive, the clarion who carries truth to those who need it most. You finish the work I started. He smiled, and it was heartbreaking in its gentleness. You will not be alone, Mireia. Other clarions will find you, drawn by the same pull that brought you to me. And maybe, in a generation or two, another chronicler will be born. And the spiral will continue. Mireia wanted to scream, wanted to shake him, wanted to demand that he choose himself, choose survival, choose anything other than this calm acceptance of martyrdom. But she was a clarion. She could sense lies. And nothing he had said was false. This was his purpose. His calling. The reason his gift had manifested so strongly in his generation. The kingdom needed the truth more than it needed one prince. And he had known that from the moment he understood what he was. I hate this, she whispered. I know. Leo pulled her into an embrace, careful and warm, and she felt the vials and scrolls woven into his coat pressing against her chest. Each one a truth preserved. Each one a piece of the evidence that would save thousands and cost him everything. But hating it does not make it less necessary. They stood like that for a long moment, two halves of an ancient tradition holding each other in a forgotten chamber beneath a palace that had no idea what was sleeping in its foundation. When they finally separated, Mireia felt different. Heavier. As though the weight Leo carried had partially transferred to her shoulders. The burden of knowledge. The responsibility of witness. How long do we have? She asked. 3 days, Leo said. For at most. Then the commander will act on my father's orders. And when he does, I will have no choice but to reveal everything. 3 days to prepare for the end of the world as they knew it. 3 days before Leo would shear himself bare and burn out like a star collapsing. 3 days before Mireia would have to stand witness to the most important and most terrible moment of her life. She looked down at the spiral carved into the stone, at the thousands of words leading inward to that final symbol. Truth leading home. Purpose shared between souls. Then we had better make them count, she said. The commander found them in the observatory. It was the second night of their preparation, and Leo had brought Mireia to the glass-domed chamber at the palace's highest point to show her the constellation map. Not the decorative one painted on the ceiling of the first record chamber, but the practical one used by navigators and scholars. He needed her to memorize it. To understand the celestial markers that would tell her when to move, where to go, how to find safe passage when she ran. Because she would run. He had made her promise. They were bent over the great brass instrument, Leo adjusting the calibration while explaining the significance of the wolf's head constellation when the door slammed open hard enough to crack against the wall. Commander Valens stood in the entrance, flanked by 4 guards in full armor. His face was carved from displeasure and suspicion, his silver fur bristling with barely contained aggression. He was a large man, built for combat rather than court, and he carried his authority like a weapon. "Your Highness," he said, and the title sounded like an insult. "You were not in your chambers. Your attendants were concerned." Leo straightened slowly, his expression shifting into the pleasant, diplomatic mask Mireia had seen him wear at court. The Golden Prince. Charming. Unthreatening. "I was showing our new archivist the navigation tools, Commander. I thought it might be useful for her work with the old trade route maps." Valen's eyes slid to Mireia, and she felt his assessment like a physical touch. Cold. Calculating. Dismissive. She was beneath his notice, except for the inconvenient fact that she was alone with the prince in the middle of the night. "The archivist," Valen repeated slowly. "The one assigned to catalog forgotten documents. I was not aware her duties included private astronomy lessons. The air in the observatory went taut. Dangerous." Mireia's gift flared, screaming. Valen's words were wrapped in layers of false concern, false propriety. Beneath them, she felt the jagged edges of malice, of suspicion ripening into certainty. He knew, or at least he suspected, that Leo was not simply tutoring a curious maid, that something more significant was happening in these late-night meetings. "I find that cross-disciplinary education improves work quality," Leo said smoothly. "Surely you agree, Commander, that a well-rounded staff serves the kingdom more effectively." "What I find, Your Highness, is that unconventional behavior during troubled times invites unfortunate speculation." Valen took a step into the room, and his guards moved with him, a coordinated advance that spoke of military precision. "Your father has been concerned about your recent activities. The late nights. The unusual requests for access to restricted areas. The time spent with palace staff rather than appropriate companions. Translation: you are being watched, and you have made mistakes." Leo's smile did not waver, but Mireia saw his fingers twitch, an unconscious movement toward his ribs where she knew he kept some of his most damning evidence woven into place. "My father is always concerned," Leo said lightly. "It is the burden of kingship. Please assure him that my activities, while perhaps unconventional, are entirely innocent." Innocent. Valen's tone made it clear what he thought of that claim. "Then you will not mind if the young woman returns to her quarters." "Immediately." "Under guard, for her protection, of course." Mireia's blood went cold. Under guard meant under observation. It meant isolation. It meant she would be separated from Leo at the exact moment they needed to be coordinating their final preparations. It meant Valen was moving to neutralize her before she could become a more significant problem. Leo must have reached the same conclusion. His expression flickered, just for a moment, the mask slipping to reveal fury underneath. Then he composed himself, and when he spoke his voice was ice wrapped in silk. "The archivist is under my personal patronage, Commander. She answers to me, not to your guards." "She is a palace servant," Valen countered. "And palace servants answer to palace security, particularly when their behavior raises questions." "What behavior?" Mireia heard herself say, her voice sharper than she intended. "I have done my job. Cataloged maps. Restored damaged documents. If my dedication to thorough work is suspicious, then perhaps the problem is not with me." Valen's attention snapped to her, and she saw something ugly move behind his eyes. "Careful, girl. Insolence toward a superior officer is grounds for dismissal. Or worse, is it insolent to defend my work ethic?" Mireia kept her voice level, though her heart was trying to beat out of her chest. "Or is it inconvenient?" The word hung in the air like a blade. Inconvenient. The same word Leo had used when describing what his father considered him. The connection was deliberate, and Valen was smart enough to catch it. His expression darkened. "You forget your place." "I know exactly what my place is," Mireia shot back. I am an archivist. I preserve truth and organize information. If that makes me inconvenient to certain people, then those people should examine why they find honesty so threatening. One of the guards made a move toward her, but Leo stepped between them, his pleasant mask finally dropping away entirely. What replaced it was something Mireia had never seen from him before. Not the Golden Prince. Not the charming diplomat. But a man with royal blood and absolute conviction, whose presence suddenly filled the room like a physical force. Enough. The single word cracked like a whip. Commander, you will remove your hand from your weapon. Guards, you will stand down. And you will all remember who you are speaking to. Valen's jaw clenched, but he gestured for his men to ease back. Your Highness, I am acting on the king's direct orders. My father ordered you to monitor me. I am aware. What he did not order was for you to harass members of my household or to threaten a young woman whose only crime is competence. Leo's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. If you have concerns about my activities, you may address them to me directly. You do not intimidate those under my protection. Your protection. Valen's smile was a cruel thing. And how long will that last, I wonder? How long before your father decides that your protection is more liability than asset? The threat was naked now, barely concealed. And Mireia's gift was screaming so loudly she could barely think through the noise of it. Lies layered over lies. Valen speaking about the king's orders while planning his own treachery. Claiming to serve while actively undermining. Every word out of his mouth was discord and deception. She was going to be sick. Leo must have seen something in her face because his expression shifted, concern breaking through his anger. Mireia. I can hear it, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Every lie. Every false word. It is deafening. Valen went very still. What did you say? Too late. Mireia realized her mistake. She had revealed herself. Exposed her gift to the worst possible person at the worst possible time. The commander's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly working through implications. A girl who could hear lies. Working closely with a prince known for his inexplicable insight into court politics. The two of them together in private meetings. Accessing restricted areas. Well, Valen said slowly. This is illuminating. He turned to his guards. Take her. Now. And summon the king. His Highness and I need to have a very frank conversation about the nature of treason. Everything happened at once. The guards moved forward. Leo shouted something. Mireia stumbled backward, her hip colliding with the brass navigation instrument, sending it crashing to the floor in a cacophony of ringing metal. And through the chaos, through her panic, she felt it. The moment when everything they had been planning, all the careful preparation for a controlled revelation in 3 days' time, shattered like glass. Because Valen knew now, or suspected enough to act. And once the king was summoned, once Leo was formally accused, there would be no time for strategy. No careful unveiling of evidence. Just desperate exposure and the consequences that came with it. Leo caught her arm, steadying her, and when their eyes met she saw her own understanding reflected back. This was it. The moment they had been dreading. Not the planned sacrifice 3 days hence, but the sudden, brutal acceleration of fate. Run, Leo said quietly, urgently. When I give the signal, use the servant's passage behind the star chart. It leads to the archives. Gather what we hid there and go. I am not leaving you. You have to. His grip tightened. If they take you, they will use you to verify whatever story they want to tell. Your gift will be weaponized against everything we have worked for. You have to run, Mireia. You have to survive this. No weapons. Valen barked at his guards. The king wants them both alive. Them both. So it was to be a joint execution then. Or a trial, which amounted to the same thing. Mireia's mind raced. If she ran, Leo would face this alone. If she stayed, they would both be captured and everything they had prepared would be lost. The evidence Leo carried would be stripped from him in private, destroyed, and the truth would die with them. There was no good choice. Only terrible ones. Promise me, Leo said, his voice fierce and desperate. "Promise me you will finish this. That you will make sure the truth survives, even if I do not." The guards were 3 steps away. 2. 1. Mireia made her choice. She slammed her weight against the navigation instrument, sending the massive brass construction toppling directly into the advancing guards. Metal screamed. Men shouted. The delicate glass lenses shattered in a spray of deadly shards. And in the chaos, Leo moved. He was faster than she expected, his royal training evident in the fluid way he redirected the nearest guard's momentum, sending the man crashing into his companions. Not fighting, just creating space. Buying seconds. "Go," he shouted. Mireia ran. She did not think. Did not plan. Just moved on pure instinct, her body carrying her toward the star chart Leo had indicated, her shaking fingers finding the hidden catch, the panel swinging open to reveal darkness and the smell of old stone. Behind her, she heard Valen roaring orders. Heard the guards recovering. Heard Leo's voice, still calm, still diplomatic, saying something about misunderstandings and overreactions. Buying her time. She plunged into the passage and pulled the panel shut behind her, sealing herself into absolute darkness. For a moment she just stood there, her back against cold stone, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her whole body shaking. Then she heard it. Muffled by the wall but still audible. Valen's voice, cold with satisfaction. "Seize him. And lock down the palace. Find the girl. She does not leave these walls alive." The hidden room beneath the archives had been Leo's idea. A place to store duplicates of his most critical evidence. Scrolls carefully transcribed from the ones woven into his coat. Wax impressions of the sigils. Even a few of the actual vials, removed during moments when he could spare them, preserved in a locked case. Mireia had thought it paranoid when he first showed it to her. Now, crouched in the darkness with her lamp turned low, listening to the sound of guards searching the floors above, she understood it for what it was. A lifeline. A way to ensure that even if Leo was taken, even if he was killed before he could expose the evidence himself, the truth would still exist somewhere. In her hands. She had been hiding for 6 hours. Long enough for the initial frenzy to die down. Long enough for the guard rotations to change. Long enough for her to stop shaking and start thinking clearly. Leo was in custody. That much was certain. Whether he was in a cell or simply confined to his chambers under guard, the result was the same. He was isolated, unable to act, and the commander would be working quickly to extract him from the situation, one way or another. Which meant Mireia had a choice. Run as Leo had ordered. Take the evidence and disappear into the city, the countryside, anywhere beyond Valen's reach. Or go back for him. It was not a rational choice. She knew that. Going back meant almost certain capture. It meant risking everything they had worked for. It meant defying Leo's explicit instructions. But Mireia had spent her entire life being rational, being careful, keeping her head down and staying out of sight. And where had it gotten her? Exiled from her pack. Buried in archives. Alone. She was tired of being alone. The secret passage system was more extensive than she had realized. Leo had sketched a partial map for her during their preparation, showing the routes between major palace sections. Servant corridors, mostly, designed to allow staff to move unseen. But some were older. Original to the palace's first construction. And those connected to places most people had forgotten existed, including the royal family's private wing. It took Mireia 2 hours of careful navigation to reach the concealed door that opened into the corridor outside Leo's chambers. She moved in absolute silence, every sense straining for the sound of guards, her heart hammering so hard she was sure someone would hear it. But the corridor was empty. Strange that. Leo was valuable. She would have expected heavy security. Unless Valen did not want witnesses to whatever was happening inside. The thought made her stomach drop, but she forced herself to keep moving. The door to Leo's chambers was closed but not locked. Sloppy. Or perhaps intentional. A trap waiting for anyone foolish enough to try a rescue. Mireia pushed the door open anyway. The sitting room was dark, illuminated only by the dying embers in the fireplace. For a moment she thought the room was empty. Then she saw him. Leo sat on the floor in front of the hearth, his back against the stone, his head tilted back against the mantel. He was still dressed, but his shirt was torn, revealing glimpses of the fur beneath. And his hands were covered in blood. Mireia was across the room before she could think, dropping to her knees beside him. "What did they do to you?" Leo's eyes opened, golden and exhausted, and he stared at her like she was a ghost. "You came back. You absolute fool. You came back. Are you hurt? Where is the blood from?" Her hands hovered over him, afraid to touch, afraid she would cause more damage. "It is mine, but not from a wound." Leo lifted his hands, and she saw the evidence in the lamplight. His claws were stained red, and in his lap, barely visible against the dark fabric of his trousers, were scrolls. Dozens of them, each one carefully removed from his coat. "I started the unweaving," he said quietly. "When Valen brought me back here, when he left me under guard while he went to consult with my father, I realized we were out of time. So I began removing the evidence, as much as I could before the guards returned." Mireia's vision blurred. "You are killing yourself. The unweaving is supposed to be a single act. Complete. Not this slow extraction." "I know, but I do not have the luxury of a proper ritual, and I needed to preserve what I could." He gestured weakly to a leather satchel lying near the fireplace. "I was going to try to get them to you. Somehow. Leave them where you might find them. I am here now." Mireia grabbed the satchel, began carefully placing the bloody scrolls inside. "How many are left? How many are still woven into your coat?" "Too many." Leo's laugh was bitter. "I managed maybe a quarter before I had to stop. Any more and I would lose consciousness. The pain is considerable." She could see that now. The way his breath came shallow and fast. The tremor in his hands. The pallor beneath his fur. He was holding himself together through pure will, and that was fraying. "Then we finish it," Mireia said. "Together. I will help you." "Mireia." "No." She cut him off, her voice fierce. "You do not get to martyr yourself alone. You do not get to die in this room with guards outside and your father plotting your execution. If the unweaving has to happen, if you have to lay yourself bare to save this kingdom, then it will be done properly. With a witness. With someone to verify and record. With your clarion beside you." Leo stared at her, and she saw something break in his expression. The careful control he had maintained for so long, the diplomatic mask, the cheerful prince persona. All of it crumbled, leaving behind raw gratitude and grief, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "I do not deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not." Mireia managed a shaky smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." She moved closer, settling beside him against the hearthstone. The warmth from the dying fire was comforting after the chill of the hidden passages. For a moment they just sat there, shoulders touching, breathing in sync. "Tell me something true," Mireia said softly. "Not about the court. Not about the evidence. Something about you. Something no one else knows." Leo was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I am terrified of being forgotten." The admission hung in the air between them. "Not dying," he continued. "Death I can accept. It is the fate of everyone eventually. But the thought that I might die and leave no mark, that everything I have witnessed and preserved might vanish as though it never mattered, that keeps me awake at night." He looked down at his blood-stained hands. "It is why I started weaving in the first place. Not because my gift demanded it, but because I needed to know that something of me would survive. That even if I was forgotten, the truths I carried would endure. That I would have mattered in some small way." Mireia's throat tightened. She understood that fear intimately. The terror of insignificance. Of being so small and quiet that the world would close over the space you occupied and never notice you were gone. "You matter," she said. "You matter to me. And you matter to everyone who will benefit from the truths you have preserved, even if they never know your name." Leo turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was achingly vulnerable. Do you know what I thought when I first noticed you? 3 weeks ago, watching you work in the archives. Mireia shook her head. I thought, there is someone who understands. Someone who treats forgotten documents like they are precious. Who believes that truth matters even when no one is watching. I wanted to talk to you so badly. But I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would see me the way everyone else does. As the charming prince. The political asset. The problem to be managed. I wanted. He paused, searching for words. I wanted you to see me as I am. And I was terrified you would look and find nothing worth seeing. Mireia reached out, taking his blood-stained hand in both of hers. I see you, Leo. I see someone carrying an impossible weight with grace. Someone willing to sacrifice everything for truth. Someone who has been alone for so long he has forgotten what it feels like to be truly known. She squeezed his hand gently. I see you. All of you. The brilliant mind. The desperate courage. The loneliness. The fear. The stubborn, reckless hope that maybe, just maybe, bearing witness will be enough to change things. Leo's breath caught. Mireia. And I want you to see me too, she continued, the words spilling out in a rush. Not as your clarion. Not as the convenient gift that showed up when you needed it. But as someone who has been invisible for so long that being seen by you feels like coming back to life. The silence that followed was different from any that had come before. Not the silence of secrets kept or truths hidden, but the silence of perfect understanding. Of two people who had spent their lives feeling like broken pieces, finally recognizing that they fit together. Leo lifted his free hand, hesitated, then carefully cupped her face. His palm was warm despite the blood, his thumb brushing her cheek with infinite gentleness. I see you, he said softly. Your courage. Your dedication. The way you treat every scrap of information like it is sacred. Your anger at injustice. Your compassion. The quiet strength that let you walk away from a pack that did not deserve you. He leaned closer, and Mireia's heart stuttered. I see the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. The small smile you make when you find a particularly elegant piece of cartography. The fact that you hum while you work, usually the same 3 bars of a song I do not recognize. The way you take your tea with too much honey because you never quite got used to the bitter taste. Mireia's breath caught. You have been paying very close attention. I could not help it. Leo's smile was soft and sad and unbearably tender. You are the most interesting thing in this palace. The most real thing. And I have been desperately, foolishly falling for you since the moment I watched you spend 20 minutes cleaning a water stain off a 200-year-old trade map like it was the most important task in the world. The confession should have shocked her. Should have felt too fast, too much, too complicated given everything else happening. But Mireia's gift was silent. No discord. No wrongness. Just the clear, perfect ring of absolute truth. He meant it. Every word. I am falling for you too, she whispered. Even though I know this ends in tragedy. Even though we have days at most before everything comes apart. I cannot help it. Good. Leo's thumb traced her cheekbone. Because I need you to promise me something. What? When this is over. When I am gone. Do not let yourself disappear again. Do not go back to being invisible. The world needs your gift. Your insight. Your refusal to let convenient lies stand unchallenged. His eyes were intense, burning with conviction. Promise me you will be loud. Be seen. Be the clarion the next generation needs. Mireia's vision blurred with tears. I promise. If you promise me something in return. Anything. Promise me that right now, just for a moment, we can stop being the chronicler and the clarion. We can stop carrying the weight of kingdoms and prophecies and martyrdom. We can just be Leo and Mireia. Two people who found each other in the darkness. Leo's smile was genuine now, bright and unburdened, and for a heartbeat he looked like the golden prince the kingdom loved. Happy. Free. I promise. He closed the distance between them, and when his lips met hers it was soft and careful and achingly sweet. Not the desperate passion of people racing against death, but the tender exploration of two souls choosing to be vulnerable with each other. Mireia kissed him back, her hands coming up to tangle in his fur, feeling the scrolls and vials woven beneath and not caring. This moment was theirs, stolen from fate and prophecy and the brutal momentum of history. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Leo rested his forehead against hers. "If we had more time," he started. "We do not," Mireia finished. "So we make the most of what we have." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "How long until the guards return?" "Until Valen comes for you." Leo glanced toward the windows, judging the light. "Dawn. Maybe an hour. Then we have an hour to finish what you started, to complete the unweaving, and to plan how we use the evidence to burn this corrupt court to the ground." She picked up the leather satchel, felt the weight of the scrolls already preserved. Then she looked at Leo, at the living archive who had chosen truth over survival, and felt something fierce and bright ignite in her chest. Not hope, exactly, but purpose. Clear and undeniable. "Tell me what to do," she said. "Show me how to help you harvest the rest. And then let us make sure your sacrifice means something." Leo looked at her for a long moment, and she saw love and gratitude and terrible determination in his expression. Then he nodded and began to explain. Dawn broke over the palace like a blade. Mireia and Leo had worked through the night, her hands steady as she helped him extract scroll after scroll, vial after vial, each piece of evidence carefully catalogued and preserved. By the time the first light crept through the windows, the leather satchel was heavy with proof. Treason, conspiracy, murder, betrayal at every level of the court. And Leo was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but she could see it in the way his hands shook, in the pallor beneath his fur, in the labored rhythm of his breathing. The unweaving was consuming him from the inside, his body struggling to cope with the systematic removal of what had become part of his living structure. "Enough," Mireia said, catching his wrist as he reached for another scroll embedded near his spine. "You have removed enough. Any more, and you will not survive the next hour, let alone the confrontation." Leo's smile was weak but determined. "I need to save some for the reveal. Physical proof they can see being extracted. Otherwise, they will claim we fabricated everything." He was right, and she hated it. The sound of boots in the corridor froze them both. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. Mireia barely had time to shove the satchel behind a loose stone in the hearth before the door crashed open. Commander Valen entered first, flanked by 6 guards. But it was the figure behind him that made Mireia's blood turn to ice. The Alpha King himself. King Aldrich was a larger, older version of his son, his fur gone silver at the muzzles, his golden eyes hard with decades of wielding power. He looked at Leo with an expression that should have held paternal concern. Instead, Mireia saw only cold calculation. And her gift screamed. Every word about to come out of the king's mouth would be a lie. Every gesture of concern a performance. She could feel it like static across her skin, making her want to crawl out of her own body just to escape the sensation. "My son." The king's voice was heavy with false sorrow. "I had hoped the commander's report was exaggerated. That you had not been meeting in secret with palace staff. Accessing forbidden archives. Engaging in activities that suggest instability." Leo pushed himself to his feet with visible effort, drawing himself up to his full height despite the pain. "Father, I am pleased you have come. There are matters we need to discuss." "Indeed." The king's gaze slid to Mireia, dismissive and cold. "Starting with why you have been consorting with this girl. The servants report strange claims. That she can hear lies. That you have been using her to spy on your own court." "Not spying," Leo said calmly. "Documenting." The king's expression hardened. "Explain." This was it. The moment they had been preparing for. But it was happening too fast, too soon, in the worst possible location with the worst possible audience. Not the full court where exposure would be public and undeniable, but in private chambers where evidence could be destroyed and witnesses silenced. Leo must have reached the same conclusion because Mireia saw him make a choice. Saw the exact moment he decided to force the confrontation into the open. Consequences be damned. I am a chronicler, Leo said clearly. The last of the ancient bloodline. My body does not just grow fur, father. It grows memory. Every conversation I witness, every secret spoken in my presence, every truth or lie uttered where I can hear it, my gift encodes it. Weaves it into my coat. I am a living archive of everything that happens in this court. The silence that followed was absolute. Valen's hand dropped to his weapon. The guards shifted nervously, and the king's expression transformed from false concern to something far more honest. Fear. You are claiming to have some sort of magical recording ability, the king said slowly. That is a convenient delusion, but hardly evidence of anything except the instability I feared. It is not a delusion. Leo's voice was steady. And I can prove it. He reached up and, with deliberate precision, parted the fur at his collarbone. Even from across the room, Mireia could see the small scroll woven there, the fresh wound from where he had partially extracted it earlier. Shall I tell you what this one says, father? Would you like to hear your own words, spoken to Commander Valen 3 nights ago in the West Tower? The conversation where you ordered my death. The king's face went carefully blank. You are making serious accusations. I am presenting documented evidence. Leo pulled the scroll free with a sharp intake of breath, blood welling where it had been rooted. He held it out, his hand trembling but his voice clear. Your words, preserved in my own flesh. The boy is a liability. His gifts make him dangerous. If he will not submit to binding, he must be removed. Valen lunged forward, grabbing for the scroll, but Leo was faster. He tossed it to Mireia, who caught it reflexively. Read it, Leo commanded. Aloud. Let them hear what their king truly thinks of his own son. Mireia's hands shook as she unrolled the tiny parchment. The handwriting was impossibly fine, but legible. And it said exactly what Leo had claimed. She began to read, her voice gaining strength with each word. When she finished, she looked up at the king and let her gift speak truth. Every word of this is genuine. No forgery. No fabrication. This is a perfect record of what the king said. The girl is obviously his accomplice, Valen snarled. They have created this fiction together. I can prove every scroll is real, Leo interrupted. He turned, showing his back, and with shaking fingers began to part the fur there. I have dozens more. Hundreds. Your conspiracy with the Northern Pack, Uncle Torrens' plan to assassinate the council, Ambassador Garrick's scheme to poison the water supply. Every plot, every betrayal, every lie told in the shadows of this court. All of it growing from my own body. He pulled another scroll free, and another, each extraction leaving him weaker, but his voice never wavering. I have been your silent witness for years. Watching. Recording. Hoping you would choose honor over ambition. But you never did. None of you did. The king's composure finally cracked. You are a traitor. Recording private conversations. Spying on your own father. I am a chronicler. Leo's voice rang with power despite his physical deterioration. It is not spying when I simply exist in the world and my body records what happens around me. I did not choose this gift any more than you chose your eye color. But I did choose what to do with it. And I chose truth over complicity. He swayed, and Mireia moved to his side instinctively, supporting him. Together they faced the king and his commander, a living archive and his clarion, and for just a moment Mireia felt the weight of that ancient tradition settling onto her shoulders like a mantle. This was what they were made for. This confrontation. This moment. You will be executed for this, the king said, and all pretense of paternal feeling was gone from his voice. Just cold fury. Both of you. And every scrap of your so-called evidence will be burned. Will it? Leo's smile was sharp despite his weakness. Because I have made copies. Hidden throughout the palace. And my clarion knows where everyone is. Kill us, and she will simply go to the next person. And the next. Until someone has the courage to act on what we have preserved. It was a bluff. They had some duplicates, yes, but not the comprehensive backup Leo was suggesting. But his voice carried such conviction that even Mireia almost believed it. The king clearly believed it too. She watched him calculate, weighing options, searching for a way to contain this disaster. "Seize them both," he finally ordered. "And summon the full court. If my son wants to air accusations, he will do so publicly, where his madness can be properly witnessed and judged." Valen smiled, a predator scenting blood. "Your Majesty, a public trial would only spread these lies further." "No." The king cut him off. "Let him speak. Let the court see their golden prince spouting conspiracy theories and claiming magical powers. Let them watch him unravel. It will make the eventual execution that much easier to justify." Mireia's gift flared with warning. The king was planning something. Some twist that would turn Leo's evidence against him. She opened her mouth to warn Leo, but guards were already moving, separating them, binding their wrists with silver chains that burned against skin. Leo met her eyes across the space between them, and she saw acceptance there. This was not the plan. But it would have to be enough. "Trust me," he mouthed. She nodded, even as rough hands dragged her toward the door. The king swept out of the chamber, Valen at his heels, already barking orders to assemble the court. The guards pulled Mireia and Leo after them, and she caught one last glimpse of the hearth where the satchel of evidence lay hidden. Evidence they could no longer reach. They were being led to a public execution disguised as a trial. And all their careful preparation, all their strategic planning, was dissolving like morning mist. The only question now was whether they would survive long enough to make the truth matter. The throne room had never held so many people. Every noble, every courtier, every person of influence in the kingdom had been summoned. They packed the great hall from wall to wall, a sea of faces ranging from curious to concerned to openly hostile. At the far end, the Alpha King sat on his throne, the very picture of reluctant justice forced to judge his own son. Mireia and Leo knelt in the center of the room, still bound in silver, flanked by guards. The chains had weakened Leo further. She could see him struggling to stay upright, his breathing labored. But his eyes were clear and focused. He had a plan. She just wished she knew what it was. "We are gathered to witness a tragedy," the king began, his voice carrying through the hall with practiced authority. "My son, Prince Leo, has made serious accusations against members of this court. Claims of conspiracy, treason, murder plots. He says he has evidence woven into his own body. A gift, he calls it, inherited from the ancient chronicler bloodline." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some skeptical, some intrigued. "This girl," the king gestured dismissively at Mireia, "claims to be able to hear lies. Together, they have constructed an elaborate fantasy of court corruption. The question before us is simple. Are these claims the product of a genuine gift? Or are they the delusions of a disturbed young man and his manipulative companion?" Mireia's gift was screaming so loudly she could barely hear the king's actual words over the sensation of wrongness they created. Lies layered on lies, false concern wrapped around genuine malice, every word a performance designed to paint Leo as unstable. "Let my son present his evidence," the king continued. "Let the court judge its validity." It was a trap. Mireia could feel it. But what choice did they have? Leo struggled to his feet, and despite the silver burning his wrists, despite his obvious pain, he stood with royal dignity. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall. "I am a chronicler. The gift manifested when I was 10 years old. At first, I thought it was a blessing, a way to serve the kingdom by preserving important conversations and treaties. But I quickly learned that perfect memory, encoded and unchangeable, reveals things powerful people would rather keep hidden." He paused, letting the words sink in. "For the past 7 years, I have been documenting the truth of this court. Not because I wanted to expose anyone, but because my body does it automatically. I cannot choose what gets recorded any more than I can choose not to breathe. And what has been recorded is a comprehensive map of corruption. Prove it, someone called from the crowd. Show us this supposed evidence. Leo nodded. He turned, presenting his back to the assembly, and with bound hands awkwardly reached up to part the fur at his shoulder blade. Even from a distance, the court could see what was woven there. The tiny scrolls, the miniature vials, the carved sigils. Gasps echoed through the hall. This is real, Leo said clearly. Growing from my own follicles. Part of my physical structure. Each piece a preserved memory. Would anyone like to verify? To examine it closely? The court physician was called forward. An elderly woman named Aloan, respected for her integrity. She approached Leo cautiously, then spent several long minutes examining his coat with expert hands. Finally, she turned to face the king, her expression troubled. Your Majesty, these items are indeed integrated into the prince's first structure. Growing from the root. This is not something attached or woven in after the fact. This is biological. I have never seen anything like it. The murmurs grew louder. Less skeptical now. More uncertain. The king's expression remained carefully neutral, but Mireia saw the calculation in his eyes. So you have a genuine biological anomaly. That does not mean the contents of these documents are accurate. You could be encoding your own paranoid fantasies. Then let my clarion verify. Leo gestured toward Mireia with his bound hands. She can sense lies. Let her examine each piece of evidence as I present it. Let her tell the court whether I am speaking truth or fiction. Convenient, Valen interjected from his position near the throne. Two co-conspirators verifying each other's claims. Hardly objective. Then test her, Leo shot back. Let members of the court make statements. Some true, some false. See if she can identify which is which. The king considered this, then nodded slowly. Another trap, Mireia realized. If she failed the test, it would discredit everything. And the pressure of performing in front of hundreds of people, knowing that failure meant death. But she had no choice. For the next 20 minutes, Mireia endured trial by interrogation. Courtiers making statements while she identified truth from falsehood. At first the lies were simple, easy to catch. But they grew more subtle. Half-truths, omissions, statements that were technically accurate but deeply misleading. She caught them all. By the time the test ended, the hall had gone quiet. Respectful. Even Valen looked uncertain. She is genuine, physician Aloan confirmed. I made several statements I knew to be false, mixed with true ones. She identified each correctly. The king's jaw tightened. Very well. Let the prince present his evidence. And let the girl verify each piece. We will hear these accusations and judge their merit. This was it. The moment they had been preparing for. Leo began to extract scrolls, one by one, reading them aloud while Mireia confirmed their authenticity. The first few were minor. Courtiers lying about expenses. Nobles falsifying land claims. The kind of everyday corruption that was embarrassing but not treasonous. The court watched with uncomfortable fascination. Then Leo moved to the more serious evidence. Uncle Torrens' plot to poison the council and seize power. Ambassador Garrick's arrangement with enemy forces to sabotage the kingdom's defenses. Commander Valen's network of assassins, employed to eliminate anyone who threatened the king's control. And finally, the scroll Mireia had read in Leo's chambers. The king's own words ordering his son's death. The silence that followed was crushing. Leo stood in the center of the throne room, bleeding from dozens of extraction sites, his magnificent coat now patchy and damaged from the unweaving, holding up the damning proof of his father's betrayal. This is what your Alpha King truly is, Leo said, his voice ringing with exhausted fury. A man so afraid of truth that he would murder his own son to keep it hidden. A man who has built his reign on lies and violence and the silencing of anyone who dares to bear witness. The king rose from his throne, his composure finally shattering. You are a traitor and a liar. Every word he has spoken is true, Mireia cut in, her voice clear and steady. I feel no discord, no deception. He is incapable of lying. And the evidence is genuine. Then you are both traitors, the king roared. Guards, execute them. No. But the guards did not move. Mireia saw it happen in real time. The moment the court made its choice. The nobles and warriors who had served the king out of loyalty or fear suddenly confronted with undeniable proof of his corruption. The physician stepping between Leo and the nearest guard. Other courtiers doing the same. No, Physician Aloan said firmly. You will not murder the only honest person in this room. The boy has risked everything to show us the truth, another voice called out. Lord Stellan, a minor noble Mireia recognized from the archives. The least we can do is listen. Others joined in. A growing chorus of resistance. Not everyone. Valen and his loyalists remained frozen, hands on weapons, waiting for orders. Uncle Torin looked ready to bolt. Ambassador Garrick had gone pale, clearly calculating his chances of escape. But enough. Enough people stood with Leo that executing him would require killing a significant portion of the court. The king saw it too. Saw his power fragmenting in real time. You have destroyed me, he said to Leo, and for the first time his voice carried genuine emotion. Not love. Not regret. Just bitter fury. You have destroyed your own father to satisfy your obsession with truth. No. Leo's voice was soft but unyielding. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure someone remembered. The king's hand dropped to his own weapon, and for a heartbeat Mireia thought he would attack his own son. But then Physician Aloan spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of decades of respect. Your Majesty, you can end this with dignity. Abdicate in favor of your son. Accept exile instead of execution. Or you can fight, and we will all watch you die a traitor's death. Choose. The Alpha King looked around his throne room, at the faces of people who had served him for years now looking at him with disgust or pity. At his son, bleeding and triumphant. At the evidence scattered across the floor, undeniable and damning. He chose. I will not abdicate to a boy who has betrayed everything I built. He lunged. Not at Leo. At Mireia. The king was fast despite his age, crossing the distance before anyone could react, his claws aimed at her throat. If he could kill the Clarion, he could claim the evidence was fabricated. Could cast out on everything. But he had forgotten one thing. Leo was not just a chronicler. He was also his father's son. Trained in combat. Skilled in strategy. And absolutely unwilling to let anyone harm the person he loved. Leo moved. Silver chains and all, weakened by the unweaving, he threw himself between Mireia and the king's attack. The impact sent them both crashing to the floor, and Mireia heard Leo cry out in pain as his father's claws found flesh. Then the guards finally moved. Not the king's loyalists, but the others. The ones who had been waiting for an excuse to act. They pulled the king off his son, restraining him, disarming him. Mireia scrambled to Leo's side. He was bleeding badly, new wounds across his chest adding to the damage from the unweaving. His eyes were unfocused, his breathing ragged. Stay with me, she begged, pressing her hands against the worst of the bleeding. Please. Leo. Stay. Did it work? He whispered. Did they believe? Yes. They believe. You did it. The truth survived. Leo's smile was weak but genuine. Good. That is good. Physician Aloan was there suddenly, pushing Mireia aside with professional efficiency, her hands already working to assess the damage. Other healers joined her, and Mireia found herself pushed back, helpless to do anything but watch as they fought to save him. The throne room dissolved into controlled chaos. The king was led away in chains. Valen and the other conspirators were arrested. Uncle Torin tried to flee and was caught at the gates. Ambassador Garrick begged for diplomatic immunity and was denied. And through it all, Mireia knelt on cold stone, her hands covered in Leo's blood, watching the healers work and praying to any deity who might listen. The unweaving should have killed him. The ancient texts said it was fatal. But maybe, just maybe, because he had done it gradually, because he had not removed everything at once, because Mireia had helped him preserve his strength. Maybe there was a chance. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. Finally, Physician Aloan looked up, her expression exhausted but cautiously hopeful. "He will live," she said. "The damage is extensive, and he will never fully recover his coat. The chronicler gift may be diminished or gone entirely, but he will survive." Mireia's sob of relief was audible throughout the hall. She was allowed to approach then, to kneel beside the makeshift cot where Leo lay, pale and still but breathing. His eyes fluttered open, found her face, and his cracked lips curved into a smile. "We did it," he whispered. "You did it," Mireia corrected. "You saved the kingdom." "We did it," Leo insisted. "Together. Chronicler and Clarion. The way it was meant to be." Lord Stellan approached, clearing his throat. "Your Highness, the Council is assembling. In light of recent events, we would like to formally offer you the throne, if you are willing to accept." Leo looked at the nobleman for a long moment, then at Mireia, then back at Stellan. "I will accept on one condition," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Transparency. No more secret meetings. No more convenient lies. We establish a proper archive system, accessible to the public. We train new Clarions to serve as truth verifiers in important negotiations. We build a government where bearing witness is honored, not punished." Stellan's smile was genuine. "I think the court would find those terms acceptable, Your Majesty." "Your Majesty." The words hung in the air. Leo, the Golden Prince who had nearly died for truth, was about to become king. Not through inheritance or conquest, but through the sheer courage of refusing to let powerful people hide in darkness. "There is one more thing," Leo added, his eyes on Mireia. "I will need a chief archivist. Someone who understands the sacred nature of truth-keeping. Someone who can organize the transition to public records and train the next generation of Clarions." He held out his hand, and she took it without hesitation. "Someone who I trust more than anyone else in this world. Mireia of the Archive, will you stand with me? Not just as Clarion to my chronicler, but as my partner in rebuilding this kingdom on a foundation of honesty." Mireia looked at him, at the man who had turned his own body into a weapon against corruption, who had nearly died rather than let truth be buried, who was offering her not just a position but a purpose. She thought about the girl who had been exiled for speaking uncomfortable truths. About the woman who had hidden in archives, trying to make herself small. About the Clarion who had finally found someone who valued her gift instead of fearing it. "Yes," she said. "I will stand with you. For as long as you need me." Leo's smile was radiant despite his injuries. "Forever, then. I will need you forever." And in the throne room of a kingdom being reborn, surrounded by the scattered evidence of corruption exposed and justice finally served, two people who had been built for each other found something neither had expected. Not just purpose, but home. 3 months later, the changes were visible everywhere. The royal archives were no longer a forgotten basement tomb. They occupied the entire eastern wing now, with windows that let in light and a staff of 12 dedicated archivists working to catalog centuries of neglected records. More importantly, they were open. Any citizen could request access, could verify the history they had been told, could see for themselves what their rulers had done. Transparency, Leo had called it. Revolution, some of the old guard muttered. But the people loved it. They loved their new king who had literally bled for truth. They loved the stories that spread through the kingdom, tales of the Golden Prince who could weave history into his own flesh, and the quiet Clarion who could hear lies like discord in a song. The stories grew in the telling, becoming legend, becoming myth. But Mireia knew the truth behind the legend. She found Leo in what had become his favorite place, not the throne room, but the public archives. He sat at a wide oak table covered in documents, his damaged coat hidden beneath simple clothes, his expression focused as he read through a petition from a border village. His fur had grown back patchily. The chronicler gift was diminished, but not gone. He could still record some things, though not with the same automatic comprehensiveness as before. The healers said he would carry the scars of the unweaving for the rest of his life. He wore them like badges of honor. "You are supposed to be resting," Mireia said, settling into the chair beside him. "I am resting. This is restful." Leo's smile was soft, familiar. "Besides, I wanted to review these before the council meeting. The border villages are reporting strange movements. Possibly just merchant caravans, but possibly something more concerning. And you cannot simply take their word for it?" "I can. But I prefer to verify." He glanced at her, his golden eyes warm. "Turns out being nearly killed by your own father makes you value thoroughness." Mireia took his hand, tracing the faint scars on his wrist where the silver chains had burned. They were not alone. The archives were open to the public, and several citizens were browsing the shelves, reading their own history. But she and Leo had learned to find private moments in public spaces. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "What you sacrificed? What you lost?" Leo considered the question seriously. He always did. One of the things she loved most about him was his refusal to offer easy comfort. "I regret the cost," he said finally. "I regret that exposing the truth required pain. That people were hurt. That my father chose his own pride over redemption and died in exile rather than accepting accountability." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I do not regret the choice. The kingdom is better now. Safer. More honest. Children are being taught that truth-telling is a virtue, not a liability. 3 new clarions have come forward, finding acceptance instead of exile. And you." He turned to face her fully, his expression tender. "You are exactly where you belong. Teaching others to value the small, forgotten records. Training the next generation to see documentation as sacred. You are brilliant and respected and seen, Mireia. That alone makes everything worth it." She leaned in, kissing him softly. Behind them, she heard a scandalized gasp from one of the older archivists, followed by a younger voice saying, "Oh hush, let them be. They saved the kingdom." When they separated, both smiling, Leo returned to his documents and Mireia to her own work. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had been built for truth-keeping, finally living in a world where honesty was possible. It was not perfect. There were still lies, still corruption, still people who resented the new transparency. Change was slow and often painful, but it was better. Measurably, tangibly better. And late at night, when Mireia lay beside Leo in their shared chambers, listening to his steady breathing, feeling the reassuring warmth of him alive and whole beside her, she marveled at the impossible path that had brought them here. She had been invisible, exiled, convinced her gift was a curse. He had been alone, carrying unbearable weight, preparing for martyrdom. Together, they had changed the world. Not because they were chosen by prophecy or marked by destiny, though the ancient texts had predicted something like them, but because when confronted with the choice between comfortable silence and dangerous truth, they had chosen truth. Every time. At great cost. And in the choosing, they had found each other. The story of the chronicler king and his clarion spread far beyond the borders of the kingdom. In other lands, other people heard the tale and wondered. Wondered if they too carried gifts they had been taught to hide. Wondered if their own sensitivity to lies, or their compulsive honesty, or their inability to forget might be not curses, but callings. Wondered if they had the courage to stand up when powerful people demanded silence. Some did. Some found their way to the kingdom that had learned to value truth-tellers. They came seeking the archives where a young woman with ink-stained fingers taught that every voice mattered, every record was sacred, every witness was essential. They came seeking the king who wore his scars proudly and reminded them that transparency was not weakness, but strength. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, the world began to change. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in pockets. In small communities. In the hearts of people who decided that bearing witness mattered more than fitting in. The spiral always leads inward, the ancient texts had said. The truth always leads home. Mireia understood now what that meant. Home was not a place. It was the choice to stand in your truth and invite others to stand in theirs. It was the courage to be seen, fully and completely, and to see others with the same unflinching honesty. It was two people, built as halves of a sacred whole, choosing each other every day. And it was the legacy they left behind, a kingdom that learned, slowly and imperfectly, that the most powerful gift anyone could give was simple, terrible, beautiful honesty. Would you have chosen truth over safety? Would you have stood beside someone brave enough to turn their own body into evidence, knowing it might cost you everything? Would you have looked at the Golden Prince and seen not charm, but desperate courage? Would you have looked at the quiet archivist and recognized not invisibility, but enormous strength? Or would you have chosen the comfortable lie? The convenient silence? The easy path that asks nothing of you except complicity? The chronicler and the clarion made their choice. They chose each other. They chose truth. They chose to believe that bearing witness mattered, even when the cost was almost unbearable. And in choosing, they reminded us all that we are not powerless, that our voices matter, that every small act of honesty, every refusal to let lies stand unchallenged, every moment of choosing to see and be seen, they all matter. They are all threads in the great weaving of history. Your thread matters too. If this story lit something inside you, if it made you feel the weight of truth or the loneliness of being the only honest person in the room or the fierce, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, speaking up might change something, then you are already part of this legacy. You are already a clarion in your own right. And there are more stories here. More tales of people who chose courage over comfort. More legends being written right now by those who refuse to let truth die in darkness. Subscribe to Cindy's Wolfheart Stories. Because here, we tell tales that burn. Tales that challenge. Tales that remind you that you are not broken for seeing what others miss. You are exactly what the world needs, even if the world does not know it yet. Welcome home, Clarion. Your story is just beginning.